Hey, welcome to this next episode of I Fight What You Fear with Richard Vega, and I'm so glad that you were tuning in today. I have a very special guest, a friend of mine, a brother of mine, right here from the neighborhood where we grew up at in Southeast Houston. He is a Houstonian. He caused a lot of havoc on the streets, and we're going to get into that. But his transformation has been just simply amazing. He has gone from running with very tough gangs in the streets to doing a lot of time in prison, becoming one of the top shot callers in the whole entire state of Texas in the prison system, and then coming out of that, transforming his life. I would like to personally let you meet my friend Samuel Sambo Jurado. Sammy, you want to give them a small introduction, and you might want to tell them about yourself?
Well, first and foremost, all glory be to God, for allowing me this opportunity to be on your platform to just explain and exemplify what God has done for me in my life.
Amen. That's right. So let's start real quick, man. You grew up right here in Southeast Houston, and it wasn't easy for you. You are in the streets at a very young age. You've been homeless, and kind of just walk me through around like 9 years old, and how that led into gangs and that path of destruction.
Well, that sometimes there's a predictable pattern that exists in certain social and economic surroundings, and I just happened to fall into that predictable pattern where the people that should have been attentive were not attentive. So basically I fell through the cracks, just like a lot of other people that grow up in the same environment, but I don't use that as an excuse. That's just part of my story. I grew up in a single parent household. My mother, great woman, strong woman, but there's only so much that a female could do in her capacity to raise 5 kids on her own.
Right.
So, with the notion and the falsehood that I was alleviating her burden by hitting the streets was wrong. It was the wrong way. It was a thinking error, but so I hit the streets and did everything that I could to alleviate her financial burdens as well, by getting involved in the life of crime at a very young age.
Yeah, so you thought you were like going out there trying to help, right, by getting involved in some stuff. And did you get exposed to gangs at a young age, or was it just something that the neighborhood started to do? Because you're a little older than us, and by the time I was coming up, back then, you had SEC that was real big and popping from the older generation, and I know your affiliation with that. But was that already in place? Were you exposed to that, or was that something that just kind of transitioned into? Or
well, the different negative elements that exist, right? Sometimes we'll go about our daily lives and we forget they exist. But I looked up to the drug dealer. I looked up to the gang member. I looked up to the hustler, because they were the ones that were allowing me to provide a means to my particular circumstance at that time, which was financial stability. You grow up, you're on the streets, you're a young man, you're being misled, misguided. So the first thing that you see that you feel is substantive or real, then that's what you naturally gravitate towards. That's why so many young men and young women are lured into that particular lifestyle, because it's the economic burden, it's the emotional burden, so they fill that gap. They draw you in, and then all of a sudden, what you thought was just temporal becomes, a decade-long or lifelong endeavor filled with a bunch of negative elements and pain and suffering, and the frustration of trying to be normal, but this has become your normal. You accept it as your normal, and that's what happened to me. I took it as though it was my normal, and I ran with it.
Which you created a lot of havoc as a young kid.
Yeah.
Although I call them old heads because you are a little bit older, but they knew you and they feared you in the streets, right? You were known for violence. You were known for the dude like you just don't mess with that dude. You know what I mean?
I think it was really just me crying out for help.
Yeah.
Because like they say, the one who hurts the most hurts other people the most.
Right.
And that's how I masked my pain and my my frustrations, because, every young man and every young woman wants to be normal.
Right.
But the social and economic situations in these underserved communities is just a fact that the opportunities sometimes are not there, and that's what happened to me. The invisible traps were set. I stepped in them, and I ran with it. But I reflect back now, and I realize that it was just me crying out for help.
Right.
It was just me. The pain that I had inside of me became everybody else's pain, and I became numb to the reality of life, and to other people's feelings and so forth and so on.
Yeah, because you've done a total of how many years?
In prison?
Yeah.
30. Yeah.
You've done 30 years.
Yeah, 30 years in prison.
But altogether, you were in prison prior to that, right?
Yeah, 32 years. If you add it all together, it would be 32 years.
But you just got out about a year and a half ago. What you did 30 years.
Right. One
30
stretch.
years. What was your crimes that you have been charged with?
I went to prison for murder, attempted murder, aggravated assault on a police officer, 2 aggravated assault cases, and a federal drug conspiracy case.
And that was the Fed case for the supposed to be conspiring to sell 1,000 kilos or something like that.
Yeah, I was involved in moving large quantities of narcotics, heroin, marijuana, cocaine, but
everything that comes with the streets.
What happens is you get involved in this street life, right? And it's like the NFL. People are prospecting, So you have this organization over here, and they seen the level in which I was applying myself, to the streets per se, and things just get bigger and bigger and bigger. But all along, the devil's trying to rob me of my God-given potential and my purpose.
Right.
So the devil's he'll give you everything that you think that you need or want. And all along, it's something that's not really substantive.
Right.
Because during that time, we could have all the money in the world, but I was still unhappy. I was still empty on the inside.
Yeah. How old were you when you got locked up?
17.
17 in your first
Got
year?
out, and then went back when I was 21. But I did 3 years my first time, and then got out. And went back and did the 30-year stretch.
Man, and that's what was it like being sentenced? Because your sentence was what, 45 years or 50?
35 years.
35 years.
Yeah.
Hearing that, man, I didn't realize you. So you did. Every bit majority of your time.
Yeah. I went to prison for a murder I didn't do. I didn't do the murder, but everything else I did do. But I pled guilty to the murder, because I had this particular mindset at that time, was that, if it comes your way, you just accept whatever comes your way. That's how I had took on my life at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have no problem solving skills. I didn't have no coping skills. I didn't know nothing about any of that stuff. So I felt like whatever was handed to you, you deal with it, you face it, and you just find closure and you move on. As opposed to, dealing with issues in their correct way like I deal with them now. So basically, I went to prison for 30 years for a murder I didn't do.
Wow. Wow, that's tough. And what we would call in the streets is you were just keeping it real to the G code. Right?
Yeah.
Because I know they want you to flip on everyone else, but, back then, and I say back then because these cats down here, they snitch on everybody, and at the end of the day, just don't get in the game, period. It's probably the best thing, right? Well, we know it's the best thing because it leads to destruction. And like you, it took away 30 years of your life.
There's a lot of people that they're lured into that particular lifestyle because how it's glamorized culturally. Right. But there's no loyalty in the game. There's no longevity in the game. There's no real legacy that you leave behind in the game. All you do, like me, and for instance, you leave a path of destruction that's immeasurable. And when I surrendered my life to Jesus, I realized that I had to commit to a lifelong manner of restitution, because of everything that I did wrong. I have to rectify my wrongs. Even though God has cleansed me, from all my sins, and has totally restored me, I still have to apply myself through a lifelong endeavor of restitution.
Right.
And that's what I do now.
Oh yeah, you
that's
do,
what
and
that's
you're
what I do
committed to
now.
it, man. I can't. I was telling somebody the other day, I can't imagine like what you deal with, because it's one thing to come from the neighborhood and get locked up, but it didn't stop there with you. Like, you went into the prisons, and then you're in the process of, or you were part of a process of the conception of what we know as Tango Blast or Houston, and you were in there. You were already living in the prisons during those times, and so when it gets birthed, you're in the mix of all that mess. And I know in the 90s was real tough in the Texas TDC, and in the early 2000s was just a lot of prison wars and gang wars, and but that it's not like you just got saved whenever they gave you 35 years. Like, you went into prison still with the same street mentality, and that carried over into TDC. And what was that like, hitting the unit being so young? Like, what was going through your mind, and how did you navigate? Because back then in the 90s, people don't understand, like, you had groups like Lama, and then you had TS, and they were always fighting for all these different territories and extorting young men to be able to work for them, or protection. So how did you navigate through all that?
Well, the gang culture is very complex. In prison you have different groups that are structured different ways, right? And the devil uses us, right, people, to create conflict and confusion, right? Mm-hmm. And you have these groups. We're in these very tight-knit living environment. Everything is emotionally charged. So it's inevitable that there's going to be some major conflicts and some major confusion, because that's the way the devil has it set up, right? Mm-hmm. And so I went in, and the gang culture was at its peak in the Texas prison system, and like you mentioned, there were several groups. But in my mind, when we started getting involved with the Tango Blast and the gangs and stuff in the initial stages, we thought that, in a sense, right, and not to justify it, that we were freedom fighters, because there was a lot of people that were oppressed in the prison system. And so we were basically there to defend the people, right, from all the negative stuff that was going on in the prison system. And a lot comes with it: the lockdowns, the riots, the stabbings, the getting stabbed. There's nowhere to run in there. There's nowhere to go. You're trapped in this box, and you're dealing with thousands and thousands of people in close knit, contact, and it's just a powder keg. It's just a powder keg. There is an outpouring of the Spirit in the prison system now.
Yeah.
As opposed to what it was 25, 30 years ago. And God is doing some wonderful, wonderful things within the Texas prison system. And for the most part, the administration has jumped on board with the faith-based dorm, with the various individual treatment programs that they have to offer. They have victim impact programs. All of that stuff, when I decided to get out of the gang life, I immersed myself in that. I surrendered my life to God, and I realized that the system, even though it may not be perfect, they have things there that they offer to where they can help you on an individual basis and also on a collective basis with basic life skills, with just changing your behavioral modification. And then they do a lot of peer-on-peer program format in there. So once I get my stuff together, I turn back around and I become a facilitator or I become a mentor. So, and the line right now is so distinct. It's so evident now. Either you're going to be on the wrong side or you're going to be on the right side. And for the most part, the majority of the guys that are in prison now, they really want to do the right thing. They're ready to come home, man, because the amount of time that we're doing, 20, 30, 40 years now, because of the harsh sentencing policies early on during the get tough on crime policies, guys are coming up for parole now after doing 30 years in prison. I mean, look what happened to me.
Yeah,
so,
of course. Hey, but you coming to Jesus didn't just happen. I mean, you like you said, you got stabbed right there, right? You're part of these riots and all this stuff, but you were so hard-headed, it landed you in segregation. Right. And how long did you do in seg?
About 11 years.
11 years in seg.
At seg is where you stay in the cell 23 hours a day. You get to come out for 1 hour a day. You're handcuffed. You go into a small cage to take a shower or a small cage to recreate. But that's if they have enough staff, But for the most part, they make sure that the guys are in administrative segregation. They at least come out, 3 times a week to go to the recreation yard. And you're in there, locked in there by yourself. But, prison saved my life. Well, Jesus saved my life, but prison saved my life.
That's where he had to reach you.
Yeah, and I mean, look, Jesus was in chains. Yeah. Paul was in bondage. I mean, we can go on, and talk about the depth of incarceration biblically with the characters in the Bible. But, being in that particular situation right there, a lot of brothers break. I've seen guys back there commit suicide. I've seen guys back there lose their mind, and I took it upon myself to really apply myself to my relationship with Jesus first and foremost through prayer, through studying the Bible, through ministering to other inmates. And, slowly but surely God began to open them doors for me. But the conditions are very, very hard, man, to deal with. And if you don't have a strong relationship with Jesus, I think it's almost impossible for you to come out and be stable.
Oh,
You're just the sales.
30 years?
Yeah.
Bro.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff changed in 30 years, right? You went in on a beeper. You know what I'm saying? You say when you got out in your possession, you still had your beeper. We've gone through, prime cone phones, Motorola, and now we have smartphones. I remember when you first touched down, you were talking about, just trying to figure out a laptop, trying to figure out how to do things. And, we take so many things for granted, but it's so needed, and you talk about all these guys that are going to end up coming for parole and they're getting out. It can be very challenging for somebody such as yourself. And I know how strong-willed you are, and I know how hungry you are for, a lot of people don't realize, man, you're not just very, you can speak very well, but you're very educated, and you always are trying to improve yourself. And I think that's phenomenal. But I can't imagine the stress that came from coming home just by operating, certain things.
Just imagine not even knowing how to send an email, and everybody just does it like it's nothing. Imagine not being able to use a copy machine, but I put all my trust in the Lord, and then my support system is very, very strong. You're one of the brothers within my circle of support that I know I can lean on when things get difficult. And what happens is a lot of guys in prison, they get so emotionally charged that they alienate themselves from their loved ones because they may not be able to go visit them every weekend. They may not be able to send them any money. They may not be able to take their children to go visit them or ride them, whatnot, so forth and so on. So they get so emotionally charged that they burn them bridges. They destroy those relationships. So when they come home, a lot of them find themselves isolated and alone. So what do? They naturally go back to doing the things that they did beforehand. But I think that one of the things that when I was locked up, and then when I go back to prison now, I let them know that, relationships, to value the relationships that you do have, and life out here, it's not easy.
Right.
It's what I tell them. Even me, involved in the prison ministry stuff that I do, I can't always write everybody.
Right.
I can't even always answer the calls when they call me because I'm in a meeting or I'm busy or we're doing some family things or whatever. So when I was locked up, I said, well, you know what? I got to work on myself, right, before I can help anybody else. And I think that's what helped me, because when God gave me the ability to see things for what they truly were, like, hey, this is me and you right now.
Right.
This isn't you and your wife. This isn't you and your mother. This isn't you and your brother, your friends, or whatever. This is me and you. Once we get this lined up and you get aligned with me, then I'll show you. If you have a great relationship with me, I'll show you how to have a great relationship with people.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Yeah. So that's what I did first and foremost, And I'm not so spiritually sound that I'm no earthly good, but me personally, this is my formula. Mm-hmm. Jesus first, family, and then everything else comes after that. My priorities, I align them how, in accordance to what I need to. But, being in there for so long, and then all of a sudden, because I was never supposed to get out of prison, I was supposed to physically die in prison. I was never supposed to get out.
That was it. You thought you were going to leave TDC and then go to your
casket,
time in the feds. Right. You was like, I remember you telling me, and I was like, wait a minute. So like, I mean, I look at the 20-year-old you, right? So you go into TDC, you come with the street mentality. You still full of testosterone. You're gonna prove yourself, right? You're a gangster, like you're the gangster, and then you get thrown this, and so in your mindset, all these years, you're like, well, I'm never gonna parole, and if I parole, the feds are gonna pick me up and take me to the federal penitentiary. So there's no coming home. So you coming home is a miracle within itself. That means Jesus was already at work and said, "You are my son.
Right.
You just gonna have to understand that you are the clay, and I am crafting this for your good. But you're gonna have to work at this." And I just want to touch on this real quick because, and you had told me, and I want them to understand, when you were in SEG, I mean, that's 11 years, bro. I couldn't do that. Right. But that's when you develop this relationship with Jesus. I mean, you're in a prison within a prison.
Within the prison. I was in level 3, line 3, like the deepest seg that you can get into, not just the regular seg.
Can I ask you how you ended up in there?
Stabbed somebody.
You stabbed somebody?
Yeah, I stabbed somebody in prison. And
so you're in the seg, and what just made you like, okay, Jesus, I'm yours. Like what? I don't, because you lived all these years of torment. And now you're in this place where what I like to call is Jesus gonna get your attention.
Sometimes I don't even have enough words, and I love to speak and I love words, but to explain it, sometimes I don't even have enough words to explain it, brother, because, you hear all these stories about how God is a God of miracles and how He delivers people. We read the story of Paul and Silas in the Bible, and, all these other miracles that he performed. And then, the type of person I was always like, well, don't just tell me, show me. Mm-hmm. And when you go to lockup, they give you, there's a Bible waiting on you right there. And if it's not on your desk, the chaplain is going to come around, or one of the volunteers. He's going to leave one of them little brown Gideon pocket Bibles for you. So, I just start reading it, brother. I just start reading it, and at that point in my life, I didn't have nothing. I didn't have nobody, because when I went back there, they put me in there with the bare minimum, and you have to either do some reflecting, because you're right there. You have no choice, right? Yeah. Or you either get bitter or you get better. My sister used to always tell me that. And, I picked up that Bible and I started reading it, bro. I started reading it and kind of challenging God, like, okay, well, you say this in the Bible, and it's real. You know how people say, well, it's the living word.
Right, that's right.
And it truly is the living word. It's not just a
100%.
book, right?
Pick it up and let it mess with you a little bit.
Right. And this is no lie, bro. I remember that there was a guard one morning. He was like, well, which one of y'all going to feed him? That's how terrified the staff was of me, right? They're like, well, which one of y'all going to feed him?
Yeah, because you weren't able to. You were trying not to let them break you,
Right.
and I mean, they had you
Right.
butt naked and throwing
Right.
stuff on you, and spraying stuff.
Right,
Like,
so-
it was a fight.
So I'm listening to the officers at the door, right? But I was already up that morning reading my Bible, you know. I said, man, y'all can open the door, you know. Y'all can go ahead and open the door. I'm not going to do nothing to none of y'all, man. You know, y'all don't have to worry about it. Y'all bringing me my tray. I'm not going to, y'all bringing me my food. I'm hungry, you know. So then, you know, the officers, they started in the morning. They'll watch me, you know, see what I was doing, how you doing, make their security rounds. And, you know, I just woke up and it was like, man, you know, God, I don't have nothing. I don't have nobody. All I have is you. I'm trusting in you, you know. And we just like me and you were having conversations. Some of the brothers in the cells next to me thought I was losing my mind, you know, because I'm sitting in the cell talking, hey, God, you know I've never really had a chance in life. Just give me an opportunity, and I'm going to prove to you the depth of my loyalty, you know. But you got to prove to me that you're real, because if I'm going to sacrifice everything that I know, because that's all I ever knew was the gang life. That was it. I never knew that was my normal. And then, so he got me out of AdSeg, put me in population. I stumbled a couple times, you know, in my initial stages of my growth and my transformation. And God just began to use me, you know, little by here, little here. And, you know, he just began to use me. He began to show up, you know. My wife was getting stronger in terms of her support. My mother started showing up. You know, I just began to think a whole lot different. You know, you could tell when when God sets you free, you know you know what it is. It's just something that comes inside of you, and it's really unexplainable. It's a personal experience, right? And the people that truly surrender their life to Jesus, they experience it. You know, and they know that when that burden is lifted off your shoulders. And I still had some things I had to do within the gang structure. You know, I went in the cell with 5 inmates, and they were going to let me walk out of the gang on my own. But I said, no, I want to go ahead and just go in this cell with these 5 inmates. And basically what they call it is they jump you out, right? And so they all jumped on me, and you know, just like Daniel in the lion's den, bro, I came out unscathed, bro. Yeah. You know, and I knew that it was over with, that particular chapter, and I just began to really truly apply myself to the ministry that God had called me to, and I was working with the same gang circles that I was gang banging with. I went back to the G5s, to SEG, to medium custody, and I began to work with them brothers, and they couldn't believe it, you know, because they never had an advocate for them. They never had nobody really come out here and just in general population and say, hey, man, I got you, brothers. And I went back. I would take, you know, coffee to them. I would take commissary back there to them. I'd bring speakers with TVs, with Christian rap on them, do Bible studies, do program format. And I just started doing it. And the administration, you know, they supported me 100%.
Awesome.
They said, hey, if this is what you've been called to do, we'd rather you do this than what you were doing.
Right.
You know, so, and initially, you know, they were a bit reluctant at first, you know, but they watched me for a couple of years and they said, hey, man, this guy right here, he's really doing what these outside ministries are coming in doing. He's doing it in here. So they got behind me, bro.
And so this process, though, because you went in at 20, this is not till probably like your mid-30s and 40s, right? I mean, this is way later on. So all that time, you know, you were, you know, acting a fool, but I love this, and when you're speaking this, because you're in SEG, you get the living word, you start reading, and the Bible tells us we can be transformed by the renewing of our mind. Right. It doesn't say by somebody coming and preach to us, like you know. I'm it breaks my heart that you had to go through all of this, right? And there's so many people like you out there that have struggled like
Right.
this. But you were in segregation, and Jesus, he says he'll never leave you nor forsake you, right? He's there all the time. And he was right there saying, son, pick up my word. Son, read my word. And
Right.
as you started to read, you started to listen, and you started hearing the guards, and you say, hey, man, open up. I'm good. Like, you're going to feed me. Thank you for bringing it out. I got a different perspective today.
Yeah.
And it started to grow. But it was that living word that you were digesting instead of all the negative stuff that you were out there in that prison gang life and consuming, like you said, 1,000 men in one cage with all different.
Oh man!
I
And
can't
everybody has
imagine.
their own belief system, and everybody's, for the most part, don't want to be there. So have you ever been in a meeting like, I'm trying to get out this meeting, man? I don't want to be here with these people. So imagine doing that for 30 years. Imagine having to go to the day room and everybody's in there. The tensions are high. The gang tensions is high. The racial tension's high. The inmate on staff tension is high. So somebody has to take a leadership role, right?
Mm-hmm.
And somebody has to balance out the playing field and show people that, hey, this isn't what this is for. This is not for us to kill each other or have riots with each other or hate the staff. We're here to rehabilitate ourselves. We're here to get it right, and we're here to not create a hostile environment, but one that's conducive to positive growth and development for all of us. Because
Right.
nobody wants to work and live in a hostile, negative, violent environment. And if that's the case, there's something wrong with you, And that's how I used to be. I used to say, okay, this is natural. This is the way it's supposed to be. But it's not the way it's supposed to be. It's just a building. It's the inmates who make the environment. It's like in the city, in Houston, in your neighborhood, my neighborhood. You make it what you make it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't always have to depend on, people to come in and give us a handout
Right.
to rectify the issues in my community.
Mm-hmm.
Let's stand up, let's step out, and let's take on that personal responsibility. And we can partner with the people that have, our best interests at heart. But let's not just take handouts from everybody and think that that's going to solve the problem. I realized that I had an ownership stake in my cell block. And the brothers that lived there, they had an ownership stake in the cell block. Mm-hmm. Let's not complain about the things that we need to implement to make our cell block better. Let's be the change that we complain about. Mm-hmm. Let's do that. And then what happened was I was doing that, and the administration took notice. So if I felt like the cell block needed to be painted and the cells needed to be painted, then I would go to the major of the ward and be like, hey, man, we got volunteers on the block. I just need you to provide the resources and the material that we need to get the job done. And we would take on them type of tasks, on different cell blocks, on the units. And I realized that a lot of these guys, they just feel like they have no outlet. Mm-hmm. They have no advocate. They have nobody that's willing to continue to see their potential, regardless of how they're acting at that particular. Mm-hmm. And that's the beauty of Christianity. God sees the depth of us. Mm-hmm. And he also sees the long-term ramifications. Right. Because and I know it's not an overnight conversion where, everything's going to be. No, it's a lifelong journey. And so that's how I began to work with them brothers in prison, And that's what I'm doing now out here in the streets, And I'm still going back to the prisons. We just went back Friday to Polanski unit. Got to go on the cell block with the brothers, sit right there with them on the table, go to their cells, and then hold a service for them in the gym. But I like to get up close and personal with them, and let them know, hey, for one, I never forgot, right, about you brothers. That's why I'm coming back. But never forget the primary reason why I'm here is to testify about what God has done for me in my life, and he can do the same thing for them. Yeah. So I try to come in with the message of hope, mm-hmm. but I want to be that example,
Well, I think you are. I mean, from our neighborhood, we, there's a lot of a lot of our friends, and I mean, everyone goes to prison. I won't say everyone, but it just seems that way.
It's like a rite of passage.
It is, I never went to prison, but I mean, I don't even know how many people I know that went to prison. But it's one of those things like, some of them go to 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, and that's a long time. Time away from home is long ways.
Oh yeah.
But from who you are, as who you were to where you are now, I mean, you made a name for yourself here in the Southeast Houston and Houston, and then you made a name in the prison system, in the gangs, and then you transformed and changed, and now, I mean, you got a job with the city. I mean, that stuff don't happen, bro. Like, I mean, unless the favor of the Lord is upon you, right?
Right.
And He's on all of us. But how much are we willing to go the distance with God and say, okay, listen, I'm truly submitting to you, and I want to do what you've called me to do, right? And you are literally going out there doing it, and you're trying to, I don't want to say undo a lot of stuff that you were involved with, because we know it's all Satan, but you have a very loud voice in the community because of your past and your transformation, right? Because there's not a lot of people that live your lifestyle that go from, gang to prison gangs to, shot collar rolls to segs to very violent offenders, doing that much time and then coming out and getting a job with the city, making a lot of relationships with pastors, going back into the prisons to speak life and saying, listen, you might have 7 years. You might be doing 10 years, 12 years. I did 32 years, 33 years. And this is what God's done for me. Like, if I go in there, I can say that, but I've never been in those shoes.
One of the things that I do is I let the brothers know that are deep in the game, right? That they're not alone. That I'm not alone. This is a team effort. Oh, man, you're doing real good, Samuel. Hey, man, we appreciate what you're doing, bro. Hey, this. But I still need the resources. Mm-hmm. I still need the support system out here to make this all transpire, whether it's a community outreach event or whether it's a prison crusade, whatever the case may be, right? I can't do it all by myself, right? That's right? So I make sure and let them know that, hey, you're not alone. And I'm not doing this on my own, because I believe that sometimes some people that get involved in this type of work, right, they think that they can do it all on their own, and that's why a bunch of them take on the task, but they never live it out for the long term. Right. They get on that spiritual mountaintop and then they fall out, because it's, I mean, you're a pastor. The ministry is not easy. Ministry is not easy, bro. And like me, I still have to deal with the transitional phases psychologically of me being released. Yeah. I still have to deal with, life in terms of its generalities. I still have to worry about my bills. Right. I'm married. I have to worry about my kids and I got to worry about all this stuff as well. Not worry, but I have to, deal with it. Yeah. And then I have to deal with job issues, and I have to deal with, because it's like a rebirth, bro. I'm starting out as a baby, and I'm humble enough, and I walk in humility to understand that. I can't ever say, well, I'm just going to live off my testimony. No, I'm going to live off my dependence on Jesus Christ, but I'm going to lean on my support system, brothers like you and other brothers and sisters that have, been very receptive in terms of my faults and because of my transparency, and say, hey, it's going to be all right, Sam. Right. If you've made a lot of inroads and God still has a great calling on your life, let's continue to make this happen. And I think that's, like we mess up sometimes, because even brothers that have not been incarcerated, or sisters that have not been incarcerated, because I've met people out here that are in a deeper prison than I ever was. Even though I was in level 3, line 3 ad seg with nothing, no property, no clothes, nothing like that.
Wow.
I've met people out here that have beautiful homes, that have beautiful businesses, but are in a deeper prison than I ever was, bro.
Wow.
You know,
That's
whether
true.
it be through addiction, whether it be through mental health issues, whether it just be through, having no drive and no ambition, whatever the case may be. But, Jesus set me free.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I'm not gonna beat them over the head with the Bible. I'm just gonna be reflective in my lifestyle in terms of my relationship with Jesus. Now, if they ask, then we're gonna sit down and have some deep conversations about the Lord, right, and some prayer. But I think that it's very, very urgent because of what's going on in the world around us, right? We're on the topic of the street life, the gang, prison life. I think that the value of life has diminished so far, and the standard has been set so low in terms of what a man is supposed to be, that it's a perfect storm. And the men of God who know the truth, that it's very, very urgent that we get out here and we empower these young men and these young women, and we show them what the true godly standard is. Because as a man of God, we set the standard.
That's right.
The world don't set the standard.
That's right.
But we think that the world sets the standard based on pop culture. Well, this is who I want to be because he's popular, because he's trending, or whatever the case may be. But people don't know. This is where I get people all the time. They don't know that the Bible has been the number one selling book since publication started, right? Every year, right? So I mean, it doesn't matter how many likes you got, how many followers you got. Jesus has the biggest following of all of history in terms of humanity, right? So it doesn't matter, man. What you've been through, where you're at. What matters the most is where are you in terms of your relationship with Jesus.
That's right.
And then that carries over into your relationship with other people. But yes, I have a real good job, man. God has opened the door for me in that area. I have a wonderful supervisor who took an opportunity to give me a chance, and that hasn't happened much in my life, and he gave me a chance. I do a lot of work for the community, the schools. I work with at-risk youth. I do community outreach projects, work with administrators in schools to educate them about not only the negative factors that are involved with the gang culture, but also I try to show them that, these individuals, they may have a label, they may be on a fast track to prison or an early grave, but they're redeemable.
That's right.
Don't give up on them.
Come on.
Don't just kick them out of school, Continue
on.
to invest in them. Continue to take the time. And sometimes they don't have the time allocated for them to really be hands-on. So that's where we come in, me and the brothers and sisters that I work with. I have a co-worker that did 16 years.
Wow.
A wonderful woman, Camille Varios, Delvin Ross, he did 20 years in prison, and God has restored them as well.
Awesome.
So we're out here advocating on behalf of the young men and women who they're right there.
Yeah.
They're right there. And their situation, if we're not attentive enough, then they'll fall through the cracks. That's what I love about the faith community too. A lot of the brothers in the churches, your church in general, other churches have come in to fill the void. They may be grown up in a home that doesn't have a father or a mother, or either or.
Yeah.
They may be homeless. They may be living with their grandmothers. But we have to touch them where they're at. We have to reach them where they're at and provide the services that they need, because the need is so great.
Yeah.
But we have to provide the services that they need to tap into their God-given potential. And what I love about me and my coworkers, the team that my supervisor put together, is that we're relatable.
Right. Yeah.
We feel their pain and they understand where we're coming from. Because a bunch of them will say, my dad is locked up.
Yeah.
One of the things that breaks my heart is that, some of the young men and young women that I work with, they know that I go back to prison to minister. And, a bunch of them will be like, hey, if you see my dad, if you see my father, tell him I said I hate him.
Oh, my goodness.
Because he's never been there for me. Or the young man will be like, hey, tell my dad I'm waiting on him to come home so, he can come see me play football. Or the young lady that says, hey, tell my dad I understand he was a drug addict or alcoholic, and I'm willing to give him a second or third chance.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm here. Tell him to write me.
Mm-hmm.
These are the stories that I have that are so, interpersonal that the guys in prison, they don't think about.
Right.
So it's been a blessing for me. And I may not run into their dad, but I may be able to share the story when I go back into prison and tell them, hey, there's a young lady out there right now that would like for her dad to come home and buy her a bike and teach her how to ride a bike.
Right.
Because I hear it all the time from the young men and young women that I work for. And it's personal for me because I was that child at one point.
Mm-hmm.
But thank God that we have an advocate, right? Jesus, right? Who is the perfect example. And sometimes I have stern conversations not only with them, but with administrators as well. Because, these young men and young women are our future.
That's right.
Whether they want to accept it or not, or whether you want to accept it or not, or I or whoever, but they're inheriting the future.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big, big responsibility.
Huge.
And I don't think that we or them at some times understand the magnitude of that. Yeah. So we just try to educate, empower, and implement various services to where they can reach their full God-given potential.
Yeah.
And my supervisor, Victor Gonzalez, he's been doing it for 30 years, 36 years in the city of Houston. And he's changed he's helped, a lot of brothers and sisters change their lives.